Hello, I'm Dr. Pierre, Samaan, and it's great being back with you. We're in the series of addiction, unmasking addiction. I hope it's been interesting for you. We're getting into the brain. Last time we spoke a little bit about it. Today we're going to speak a little more about the brain because I wanted to bring the foundation of what makes up the brain to give us a better understanding of how addiction damages the brain, changes the brain. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the brain today, and then next time we're going to get into a discussion of how the brain is affected by uppers, and then we'll get into downers, and then we'll get into the all-arounders. So stay with us if you want to learn more, or if this can be used in helping others as well. Well, Unmasking Addiction, Brain on Drugs, Part 2. How can you completely unmask something like that? It's ongoing. It's been going on for generations, as far back as recorded history. And it's probably going to continue on for quite some time because people are people, and things happen, and people get upset, and people seek happiness in all sorts of different ways, and they look after themselves to find that path of least resistance when they get upset, and sometimes that leads to addictions, especially when you have the individuals out there who make money on it, and that's not only the bad people, you might say, who make their money pushing it and so on, but it's also the so-called good people who are making money because their consciences have been seared, and they don't feel that guilt and recognize the damage, the harm that they're doing to their own children, because their own children are going to be harmed by the drugs, by the addiction that they foster in either promoting it or looking the other way while it's going on. Unmasking Addiction. The Unmasking Addiction series has identified 5 essential areas involving spirit, soul, and body addiction. And we've spoken about 4 of these areas. We're in Unmasking the Brain today, part 2. Consider your brain, and I always am fascinated by the similarity when I think about it, so I'm bringing it up, and I'm sure you've thought about it as well, but consider your brain to be similar to a computer, your laptop or even your phone. It's just amazing how somebody thought of all this, and it just kind of came together that way, and it's very similar to how the brain is made up, how our bodies are made up. In that sense, the computer's electrical power is compared to the energy of a metabolic flow powering the brain, which gives the brain life. So metabolic flow basically is blood flow, electrical flow, the electrical impulses, and the chemical flow. And all that together is the metabolic flow that gives life to your brain, to the tissues of your brain, the organs of your brain, the parts of your brain. Computer software analyzes, interprets, and communicates from and to the computer. The brain itself, the material part, the white and gray matter, the neurons, the cells, the blood, the chemicals, and whatever else that I didn't mention, is comparable to your computer hardware. The keys on your computer, the drive in the computer drive, the components, the circuitry, the screen, and whatever else that I've left out because I'm not an IT person. But all of that is very similar to the functions, the way the things function in our brain. Not keeping your computer safe not keeping it safe from viruses or even keeping it clean, it's going to be problems. And, these viruses like malware and whatever else that occur can slow down your computer, slow down and create damage to the computer, or even cripple the computer where it just isn't going to work at all. We don't like that when that happens. So I know when there's a glitch in my computer, I go, oh no, it just sets me back. And then it takes a while if I have to get somebody to help me to fix it. Our brains are the same. Your brain is a body organ consisting of soft, spongy mass of nerve cells and supportive tissues. The brain organ consists of three prominent parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the intelligence stem, or the brain stem. The components work together, and we'll be looking at some of these things. However, each region has unique functions. So like your computer, the circuitry, each part of it has a unique function. And if one isn't functioning, it kind of messes up the flow of everything else in there. And so other things may go bad. I was driving my car and the light came on when I was stopped, and I have that engine where it stops when you stop at a light for the battery and all that, and then it starts up quickly again. But when it starts back up, the stabilizer light came on, and sometimes the brake light would come on. I'm thinking, well, what's going on here? And after a while, I was doing a little more often, and I'm thinking, all these difficult problems going on and everything, it's going to be costly and everything. So I finally took it to the dealer and talked to someone else about it. Well, it could be this, could be that, So I finally went to the dealer. They did the plug-in and all that. Oh, well, your battery's low. You need a new battery. And it causes that electrical malfunction that triggers these warnings because it's not getting enough juice. It's not getting enough power to the electrical function. So the electrical function recognizes something's wrong and it starts lighting up. And so they put a new battery in and all's well. Now, I would have never thought it was just the battery that was doing it. I'm thinking all these difficult things. Our circuitry in the brain is very similar, just like the computer. One little thing going wrong has a cascading effect on other things. The cerebrum, the most significant section of the brain, fills most of the higher skull. It's that upper part of your brain, the massive part of the brain. It has two halves, the cerebral hemispheres, they call them, left and right, or proper sides. And I think of that often, and I think, well, which one's working right now? What's one saying to the other? The cerebrum uses data from our senses. So our senses, sight, smell, touch, hearing, taste, our senses, they send messages, and the messages are then distributed, and the brain says, okay, this side needs to pay attention to that, this side needs to pay attention to this other thing. So the senses inform us what's happening around us and tells our physique how to respond, our body how to respond, our mind how to respond to things from these senses. But the senses have to pass through those two hemispheres. And the right hemisphere controls the muscle tissues on the left facet. So your right hemisphere controls the left side of your body. The left hemisphere controls the right side of the body. And so the left facet of the body, the left hemisphere, controls the muscle groups in the right part of the body. And when that occurs, if there's a glitch, sometimes even if you have a headache on one side, if you ever notice that, you kind of feel a little odd on the other side. The left hemisphere controls intelligence. I think of that left hemisphere a lot because I'm a little damaged, I believe, in math. I never did like math and never did very well. And then I learned math is in the left hemisphere. It's in the basal left area of the brain. And I always figure, well, there must be a hole back there or something with math. So the left hemisphere controls intelligence and contains speech and thoughts and reading, thinking, learning. And so all that's very important. And if there's damage there, well, those areas of language, reading, thinking, and so on can be held back, slowed down, or even stopped in some way. The cerebellum is beneath the cerebrum. So you have the right and left hemispheres of the brain, and the cerebellum is down below in the back, and the cerebellum beneath the cerebrum at the rear of the brain controls your stability and complicated movements like strolling and talking even, because that's a movement. To talk is a movement. Addiction damages the cerebellum. Addiction damages all these parts of the brain that we're talking about. The medulla, or the brain stem, the stem of the brain that connects the brain with the spinal cord, controls things like starvation and thirst, some primary anatomical functions that are very important, such as physique, temperature. Do you feel hot? Do you feel cold? Cardiac, your heart rate, your blood pressure, your breathing. When there's addiction, the medulla or brainstem is damaged. Addiction damages those parts of the brain. The cerebral fluid part of your brain that goes not only in the upper part of the brain and in the inside layer of the brain and in the ventricles, the open areas, you have that fluid, and it also flows down your spine. So liquefied tissue produces cerebral spinal fluid that contours the brain's ventricles. So it's in there, it's in those hollow spaces, it fills it in, and we need that. It flows in and around the brain matter and spine to provide additional cushioning from damage, while also supplying nutrients to not only the brain, but other parts of your spinal system, your nervous system. Addiction damages the cerebral spinal fluid. I don't know, why be an addict? Why have issues if it's doing all that damage? Then you have the cranium, your skull, that's above everything, and the covering of the bone that protects the brain. And those pictures, I was looking at pictures to put on here, and I thought, they were just kind of all scary. Whenever you see a picture of a skull, it's just kind of, that's kind of creepy. So I was just trying to, okay, which one is the least creepiest of the pictures? And I thought, okay, this is the least creepiest of the pictures. So in looking at it, it just seems so bare by itself, doesn't it? The blood-brain barrier is within the skull, so it's in the inner lining of the skull, covering the brain itself. And the blood-brain barrier within the skull's dome consists of 3 thin membranes referred to as meninges. And you know what? Addiction damages the cranium, damages the skull. It can soften the bone skull, the bone of the skull, and it damages the blood-brain barrier, or the meninges. The blood-brain barrier acts as a filter, screening out and converting toxins, rewriting like a virus in your computer, rewriting that virus so it doesn't damage the computer, so it filters out, it blocks it from going in. Well, your blood-brain barrier does the same thing, filters out, blocks toxins from coming in, sends them back into the bloodstream, and it works wonderfully, except when there's addiction, because addiction damages the filtering. You know what? Addiction is a deception. It leads to hate and bondage. If you think of the character of God, the character of God is made up of truth, love, and freedom. What's the character of addiction? Well, the opposite would be true, wouldn't it? Deception or lies, hate, even murder, and instead of freedom, bondage, persecution. Addiction damages the brain. The abuse of illicit substances or alcohol, or even addictive behaviors, because remember, when you have an addictive behavior, you're secreting chemicals that just aren't supposed to be secreted as much as they are, and the dopamine and all of those excitatory neurotransmitting chemicals are flooding. You build tolerance. You need more. More occurs, and as a result, your entire body starts filling up with toxins as a result of that. And in needing more stimulation, you turn to outside things to give you that stimulation, to add to that stimulation as well. So addictive behavior is not just a behavior, it's not just doing something, it's doing something to such excess that it damages the quality of your body and mind. So the abuse of alcohol, illicit substances, and addictive behaviors will act similarly to the virus. It introduces the virus into the body, into the bloodstream, just like it does, just like a virus in a computer. And it short circuits and derails the chorus of the pleasing melodies of thinking, of thought. Restore your brain. You can fix it, you can do something about it, or you can help someone to do something about it. But remember, you can't do it if they don't want to fix it, if they don't recognize that they're being so damaged, they're not the same person. All you can do is set the example, lead the way, encourage whenever possible. But be careful, stay guarded. Don't fall for their traps of drawing you into their addiction because they feel more comfortable sharing with someone else. Now they're not so bad. Look, you're involved too. And they'll suck you into it. And many times it's not intentional, it's just a natural thing. Oh, let me share this with you. This is so much fun, or this is so great. I want you to have fun too. I want you to enjoy it too. But they're not remembering the downside to whatever it is that they're wanting you to have fun with. Be careful with that. Watch out, especially for many of the synthetic drugs nowadays, and we'll be getting into those details about all that later. Be careful that it changes their brain. They're not the same person. They're someone else. And you remember them perhaps as your child, as someone you love, as someone you care for, someone that you used to be able to trust. But once they get into those synthetic drugs, they're different now. Their brain is changed to such a point that it's no longer producing good fruit. It's producing foul things. And in that damage, they see things differently. They sear their consciences. Therefore, what you would never do, never think of doing, they are going to do. And that's why many of them will kill their parents or kill their loved ones just for a few bucks or for something casual, no big deal. How can they possibly do that? Because their brain has changed over time. even to the point of eating flesh, biting into people and so on. I can't even imagine that. But because their brain has changed, their conscience doesn't tell them, no, don't do this, that's not good. They're just doing something like an animal instinct would lead an animal to react certain ways. Pause when you start to see that going on with someone you love or care about. Step back and either get help or talk to them about getting help, but never argue with them. Never get into a confrontation with them, especially if they're using at the time. But even when they're not using, the brain is still changed. They're not going to be nice. They're going to be angry and upset. And in a way, okay, they got triggered. But what happens is they're going to think about it a little bit more. Perhaps you're planting a seed, but you want to do it peacefully and carefully or cautiously. Well, what does the Bible say? The Bible says in the Remedy Bible, which is a paraphrase using extra meanings of the Greek and Hebrew words, make a tree good and it'll bring forth good fruit. Make a tree bad and it'll bring forth bad fruit. For a tree is recognized by its fruit. Therefore, surrender yourselves under God's almighty healing hand, that he might restore you, uplifting you to his ideal in due times. In other words, it may not be right away, but in due time. Pour out all your worries, frustrations, and burdens upon him, because he cares for you. That's what the Bible says. Makes a whole lot of sense. I would rather produce good fruit in my brain and in my behavior than that nasty stuff that you bite into and, oh, this is spoiled, this is awful. Take care about all this. Be careful. Money is behind much of this. It's not only pleasure-seeking or escaping, it's profiteering, and it's power and control over the masses, over a group of people, over a community, over a family. That power and control allows those who exert it to get more of what they want at your expense. And addiction is one way of doing it. Don't let them damage your brain. Don't let yourself damage your brain. Well, I hope this was helpful. Next time, we're going to get into talking about what the uppers, the unmasking the damage of uppers in the brain. May your troubles be more minor, blessings more, and happiness come through your door. See you next time.